Hi there, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Brian Pollock. I'm Marketing Manager here at League, and we'd like to welcome you to our latest webinar series, our latest webinar in the League webinar series, Workplace Health, the 4 Pillars of Employee Wellness. Today, we've got a very special guest that's going to be taking us through the webinar. Lori Castleman is our Chief Health Officer here at League, and it only felt appropriate that she would take us through this topic. She has more than 20 years experience in health and wellness and insurance, and she joined League most recently from Sun Life. She joined League most recently from Sun Life, where she held several executive roles in their group benefits organization. Lori's a board member at Sanofi Aventis Healthcare, and she works with Get Active Toronto. So that's a little bit about her, a bit about League before we do dive in and pass it off to Lori. At League, we drive engagement by empowering employees to live healthier, happier lives through personalized care. But in the end, we really just want to help people be better. And we want to help them be better, whatever that means to them. For you, it might be about finishing a full marathon without stopping. And for other people, it might just be getting to spend more time with their friends and family. The point with be better is it's whatever it means to you. At League, we see ourselves as the future of healthcare. We know benefits are only valuable when employees truly feel empowered to use them, and we also know how big of a gap this is in the industry. That's why we've tried to reimagine health benefits. We're consumer-centric, preventative, personalized, and always on. We have a full solution for you to build a culture on your health and workplace wellness. In the end, we really want to make life easier for your employees. We do this by offering flexibility and choice, financial control, a health marketplace, and we're all digital. With flexibility and choice, your teams choose what to spend their benefit dollars on based on what's important to them. As employers, you get unprecedented control over your plans by offering a combination of insurance, health spending accounts, lifestyle spending accounts, and workplace health services that match your needs and budget. But we also know that as employers, financial control and knowing what's coming down the pipeline is really, really important. With our benefits, you only pay for what gets used, and that allows you to plan effectively and eliminate year-end surprises. For your employees, they get access to our health marketplace. They get to choose from a network of thousands of health providers and services, and they can browse, book, and pay for all of that through our app. And last but not least is our digital experience. We're all digital. Employees use our app and our experience for everything to do with their benefits, including paying for and submitting claims through our digital wallet. And for employers, that means you get to say goodbye to forms because all administration is done through our portal. In the end, we're very, very excited to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. And I think without further ado, I can pass it along to Lori Castleman.
Thanks, Brian. So thanks everyone for joining us today. I was just remarking that Brian has a fantastic radio voice, so he's setting a very high bar for our webinar. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity today to really speak to the group about an area that I'm pretty passionate about, which is the area of workplace health. So although I've had the good fortune to work in many different areas of both the health benefits and the healthcare sectors, I've long been quite passionate about the business value of investing in employees and investing in employee health. So I'm excited to have the group here today and excited to share both some of the important statistics and business case facts, as well as some great case studies and best practice information. So just to give you a quick synopsis of what we'll talk about over the next 35 to 40 minutes, as I mentioned, I want to start with some of the statistics. I do think it's always important to level set with some data and some stats that really reinforce the value of the investment in employee health. I do think it's quite intuitive, but there's some pretty powerful data to back that up. We'll spend a few minutes on the current landscape, so what's happening across North America as it relates to employee health programs. The landscape has changed quite a bit over the last few decades, and I think we're in a pretty fantastic place these days, so I'll share some of that background as well. And then we'll talk about the importance of a holistic approach. So we really believe that it's very critical in terms of having a successful program to focus on many different aspects of health and well-being. So we'll take you through what the 4 pillars are that we see as really foundational to any great program. And then it's always fun to share some case studies and tell the fantastic stories of organizations that are really getting it right and doing some fantastic things in this space. So why does this make sense? Why is workplace health and employee wellness just a really solid value proposition? And again, it seems intuitive, but I think that ultimately, to me, it comes down to the fact that the foundation of any great company is people. And as a business owner or business leader, it does seem fairly intuitive that you would look for every means possible to optimize that most valuable business asset. So, investing in the health and well-being of employees, to me, it's just common sense. But also, if you think about sense from a C perspective, CENTS, I think it also just makes great financial and business sense. So I recently wrote a blog that was called, Are We Still Making the Case for Workplace Health? I think, the really positive thing that I've seen over the last few years is that most organizations now are really understanding, that intuitive aspect of health and well-being and are focused a little less on what's the direct return, for my dollar spent on some of these programs. But as I said, let's just take a look at some of the statistics that bring that to life. So when you think about the current landscape as it relates to population health, there's some really compelling reasons why getting at prevention and health promotion can make a difference. So, from a prevalence perspective, 3 in 5 employees are now living with at least one chronic condition. So there are varying studies that speak to, what percentage of the employee population are living with what types of chronic conditions. But the bottom line is, for any business owner or business leader, anywhere from, 50 to 60% of employees typically are struggling with any one type of chronic condition. So again, to varying degrees, but there are many supports that can be provided by workplaces, whether you think about health benefits and insurance programs, resources and support such as EAP type programs, or even, again, prevention and health promotion options. 1 in 5 North Americans are suffering from mental health issues today. And 33% of Canadians are now living with diabetes or pre-diabetes. So again, if you look at the combination of those particular, condition or prevalence points and those statistics, it's there's a very strong rationale to put some focus on supporting those employees. And what that comes down to as well, if you look at the combination of those risk factors or the prevalence of those conditions and the health expenditures for most organizations, what we're finding is that there is approximately a 7 to 9% increase on an annual basis in health-related costs per year in most organizations. If you look at the top 3 drivers, so back to some of the statistics that I talked about on the previous slide, the prevalence of various types of chronic illnesses, the top 3 drivers of those increasing costs in organizations are cardiovascular related, musculoskeletal related, or mental health related. Okay, and if you look at where the highest costs coming in, through those 3 condition areas, typically it's with regard to drug and disability expenditures. And as I mentioned previously, certainly if you dig into the disease states in each of those categories, many of those conditions or many of those risk factors can be prevented with lifestyle-related changes. So just to give an example of that, in the cardiovascular category, if you take a look at type 2 diabetes, and if you recall in the previous slide, I talked about the fact that approximately 33% of the North American population is now diagnosed with either diabetes or pre-diabetes. The World Health Organization tells us that 80% of diabetes in the type 2 category is largely preventable with lifestyle-related changes in 3 key categories. Those key categories: nutrition, physical activity, and smoking cessation. So if you relate that back to the types of programs or supports that can be put in place for individuals, there's a great deal that can be done to prevent those types of illness and the associated costs. So the bottom line, and you're going to hear me talk about this throughout the presentation, is that prevention can play a key role. These are just a few examples of the way that lifestyle changes or behavioral health changes can impact the risk profile from a population perspective, but also from a workplace perspective, and those associated costs that employers are facing. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about, the business case or return on investment. It's long been a pretty hot topic when we hear about workplace wellness programs. So as I mentioned, I think the case is definitely becoming stronger, and there's a great deal of empirical evidence, from various workplaces as well as various research studies that just reinforce the fact that these types of programs, if done well, can result in cost savings for organizations. The challenge has always been to get at a direct cost return. So if you think about return on investment, typically, the question is, for every dollar I spend, how many dollars can I expect to see returned? And the challenge in the health and wellness space with actually getting at hard ROI figures is that, it's multifaceted. I think in many cases, one of the key drivers of, return or cost containment when it comes to health and, health risk management is casual absence. And many organizations don't either have the means or are not currently tracking casual absence in such a way that they have really valid data to stack against changes that they're seeing in terms of population health. However, that said, those are the areas where we typically would look to see those sort of short-term immediate cost returns. Longer-term returns would come in areas such as drug and disability, as I talked about previously. They're sort of the long tail factors that can be impacted with that return. But I think point being, typically what you're trying to measure is the result of something not happening. So if you're able to prevent a risk from occurring or prevent an individual who has a health risk from going downstream and incurring a much more significant health condition, which results in those longer term costs, it's difficult to capture with any kind of credibility that avoidance of future costs. And so I think that's long been one of the bigger challenges in the space. And so what I'm really pleased to see that's happening, I would say throughout the industry, more and more so recently, is a shift towards less direct ROI and more value of investment. So ultimately, organizations are thinking about, some of the factors that we touched upon on the previous slide, which I think many would call, more of the, let's say, softer costs, but they are very much value-based costs to organizations. So engagement being one key metric that's definitely become much more popular for organizations to capture and to associate with, great programs that are focused on health and well-being within the population. I'll talk about this later too when we get into the case studies. How can you create an approach that's multifaceted so that you can really get at capturing, this VOI figure, especially in smaller workplaces. Okay, and I think also another really important point as it relates to the value of investment story is that, many organizations are now beginning to capture engagement. There's excellent tools to survey employees around engagement. So Gallup has, a fantastic tool pretty widely available to employers and employee populations. And the bottom line is that one particular sort of stat or area of metric alone can be really powerful. So just as an example here, there's one particular study that talks about the fact that organizations with higher engagement are 22% more productive. I've seen those figures go up to 40-45% from a productivity perspective with a very highly engaged, highly motivated employee base. So again, I think that's, it's some pretty powerful evidence for the value of workplace programs. So in terms of what's happening within the current landscape, so again, I think this is a really positive story. What we're seeing is that 70 to 90% of North American companies are now indicating that they offer some form of wellness program. So pretty compelling and pretty positive from sort of a prevalence perspective within organizations. Where there's an area of opportunity, and I think this is an area that we here at League are very much focused on, is the fact that in the smaller end of the market and smaller workplaces, and particularly those with under 50 employees, those statistics are quite lower. So approximately 50% of companies with under 50 employees have these types of health and wellness programs. Something else I do want to point out as well is that, not all wellness programs are the same. We'll certainly talk about that, and I'm sure it won't come as a surprise to anyone. But I think one of the key points is that for any really sustainable, investable, and outcomes-oriented health and wellness program, to really be meaningful to the employee population and to drive at those engagement metrics, they need to be part of the culture, okay? And they need to be robust. And we'll talk about that a little later as well from a, sort of holistic and four-pillar perspective. In addition, what we're seeing with the changing workforce is that these types of programs, and I think, again, it's no surprise given the 70 to 90% statistic as it relates to organizations, these programs are really becoming more of a need to have versus a nice to have in organizations. So just a couple of, proof points to bring that home. In a recent survey that was done within the last few years, 84% of employees are now indicating that they expect their employer to help them manage their physical health. When we look at psychological health, that number is slightly higher at 86%. But again, I think what's really powerful about these two proof points is the fact that it's this expectation. So this is a real shift that we've seen over the last, I would say, decade. And, I'm showing my age a little bit here, but I can think back to a decade prior to that with sort of earlier days of health and wellness programs. Many organizations weren't sure if they should be playing a role or not in managing employee health. And you would hear a lot of, isn't that really up to employees? It's sort of outside of the office, outside of work hours, and that's up to individuals. I think we've seen a tremendous shift in that, and it comes home through the number of employers that are offering programs. But, this component as well, the fact that employees really do believe that the employer does have a role to play and they should be supporting their health. Okay, and I think in addition to that, as you think about employee health benefits, which are typically seen as part of the employment proposition, and most organizations, particularly 50 lives and over, but also under 50 lives, are offering some form of health benefits to their employees. The demographics of today's workforce are looking for those health benefits plans to play a role in that health support. Okay, so thinking about convenience, flexibility, and choice within health benefits plans is critical to bring these two components together. What are the insured benefits? What's available through my health plan? What are the resources and supports that my employer is providing to me, more from a financial management perspective? And how does that actually help me to manage my health? I think that connection now more and more needs to be made. And I think just for a moment on the changing workforce, this is even more so the case because of, the predominant proportion now of millennials in workplaces. We're close to 50% in most North American workplaces of the millennial generation at this point, which is only going to increase. By 2025, the expectation is that millennials and the cohort following behind our millennials will make up close to 75% of North American workplaces. So back to the point of convenience, flexibility, and choice, and a focus on health. These are all things that are very much top of mind, again, in that employment expectation for the millennial generation. So there is an area of opportunity here as well, because what we're seeing is that there continues to be somewhat of a disconnect between what employers are offering to employees, particularly from a health benefits plan perspective, and what employees are looking for, back to flexibility and choice in those plans. So I think that's an area that obviously we here at League are focused on, and I expect that the industry will continue to focus on this more significantly in the coming years as well. So with that, I'd love to start to now really dig into the how. So how do you really bring a great health and wellness program to life? I wanted to start with a couple of key foundational principles. So first, best practices. So in implementing any great health and wellness program, the number one thing that I've talked about over the years, and that I see with any great organization that's got a really solid, sustainable program, is tremendous leadership support. And it starts from the top down, so CEO, senior leadership team. The organization really needs to believe that this is an important part of the culture and an investable part of the culture. So it goes back to some of those business case points. If at the leadership level that support is not there, employees can be looking for and wanting to see all of the health support in the world, but they will not get traction necessarily. You'll not see the type of participation, the nature of sort of evolving programs with lots of great options for employees. And unfortunately, they also don't typically get tied to the outcomes that, really bring life to these types of initiatives. Second, creating a very robust communication plan. One of the most unfortunate things that we see with wellness programs, especially in larger organizations, is, there are these fantastic initiatives, resources, tools being put in place, but if you ask any given employee, they may know about 20 or 25% of them. So it's very unfortunate, because when there is a time of need or a health risk, they are perhaps not connected to the right resource or support that they would need. Third, I think many programs fall short if they're just sort of program or initiative based, and there hasn't been a cultural change that's focused on health. So just a very small example, you see an organization that's still, let's say, bringing in donuts and cookies and has a pop machine in the lobby, et cetera, but that is, doing a nutrition lunch and learn, right? And talking about the importance of really healthy eating, fruits and vegetables, et cetera. So, there's a disconnect there, and that can be very meaningful to employees because it just doesn't feel authentic. So policies and practices need to be part of a great program. It can't just be, sort of the once a month program or initiative. Diversity, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in terms of the 4 pillars. The bottom line is that, every employee, every individual is different as it relates to their health. And to have a great program that's going to have a high adoption rate, there needs to be something for everyone, and not necessarily something for everyone at every given point in time. But if I'm an employee in an organization, and let's say the whole focus is physical health, and that's not something that I'm looking to my employer to support, but I would love for my employer to support my mental well-being, my financial health, et cetera, I may just not participate in the program because there's not something in there that's really speaking to me and my needs. So I think it's really important that programs are diverse and also very inclusive of a broader population. And lastly, evaluating, learning, and adjusting is really key. What's working, what's not, and how can you shift your focus, whether it's moving into the next month, next quarter, or next year. So why think holistically? I mean, I really just touched on this in the last point as well. The bottom line is that the best programs are, they're bringing a wide variety, and as I said, there's just something for everyone in those programs. And the last component I wanted to touch on really from a foundational perspective is this, concept of the health continuum. So when you think about an individual, and take yourself as an example, at any given point in time, if you think about aspects of your physical health, your mental health, your social health, and your financial health, you may be at different points on a continuum as it relates to that health. And, we're using mental health as an example here on the slide, but this applies across all of those pillars. So an individual who's, sort of healthy at work, highly productive as it relates to their mental health, may actually be sort of managing a chronic back condition. Okay, so in the mental health area, they're in the healthy zone. In a physical health area, you're sort of on the other end of the spectrum where you're working through an injury and perhaps on a treatment plan, medication, et cetera, to support that injury. And what we want to avoid in any of the categories is anyone sort of falling into that, the far right of that continuum, which typically does result in being off work, okay? And so, again, I think programs need to take into consideration, and the best programs need to take into consideration the fact that, you've got all of those populations within your overall workplace. So both those are very healthy, working well, highly productive, to those who perhaps are struggling with either a health risk or a chronic condition in any particular category, and maybe looking for those resources and support that an employer could very much offer to help them stay productive and at work, and potentially move back down the continuum to a healthy state. So let's talk about the 4 pillars. I just gave a little bit of a preview there of the 4 pillars as we see them within a very comprehensive and holistic program. So bottom line here is that it's really not just about physical health anymore. Very early health and wellness programs were very much focused on fitness and nutrition, almost as a standalone, okay, and encouraging employees to participate in fitness-related activities in workplaces. If you go back to sort of late 90s, early 2000s, there were more fitness facilities and organizations, more focused on sort of walking clubs, whatnot. At this point, I'm really excited to say we see more and more organizations, whether it's small or large, who have moved well beyond physical health and are focused on, some of these other aspects that I talked about as well, and are offering much more holistic programs. And there's some great proof points here. So 78% of employers are now indicating that they've expanded their workplace health programs to include aspects of social and financial health. Financial worries is listed as one of the leading stress factors for workers, and so improving financial literacy can go a very long way. And I talked about some of the statistics around physical and psychological health in terms of employees' expectations. In the financial health category, 70% of employees believe that their employer has a responsibility to support them. And that support, I'll talk about some of the ways that employers can provide that support. But ultimately, there's many things that can be done, and often it just starts with awareness and some education. And lastly, 74 to 78% of Gen Y and Gen Z believe that mental health is central to their overall well-being. I mean, this is a very important area of focus. And we saw that, again, the expectation is that employers will provide support in that category. So let's start with mental wellness. What I wanted to do in this next section is just share with you some examples of how to create a culture of health. So I talked about the importance of policies and practices so that, an organization is creating that culture and day-to-day focus on health and well-being beyond any particular program or initiative, okay, that's being offered. So a couple of examples in terms of best practices culturally to help support people's or employees' mental health and well-being. One of the number one things that I recommend are flexible work arrangements. So I think we've all been in the situation where, the stress of getting to a job at a certain time can really sort of derail any individual's sort of peace of mind first thing in the morning. And so I think providing that flexibility, if employees need to drop off their children, or let's say that's the time of the day that they're working out, can really go a long way with employees in terms of work satisfaction. In addition, peer support, and I can't say enough about how important it is for individuals who are, struggling with any type of, mental health issue, mental health condition, to feel that they're supported in their workplace, to feel that there is opportunities to have that conversation, to feel that there is no stigma associated with having that conversation. And often, some of the best programs are really about peer support in workplaces. So I know who I can go to perhaps if I am having a really bad day, who I can have that conversation with. That can go a very long way for an employee who's struggling with depression, just as an example. Meditation and mindfulness, also very much top of mind. This is a really easy thing to do. So I've seen organizations where, again, right from the senior leadership level, doing things like, a 2-minute or 5-minute meditation at the top of a meeting or at the top of the day can go a very long way. Again, it's reinforcing the fact that it's important to us as a business or as an organization to give people that opportunity to just take a minute and, really sort of center themselves before they begin the workday. And again, we here at League do this on a really regular basis. I've seen lots of organizations get this right, sort of very well entrenched in the organizational culture. So a couple of other great examples of programs to help get an organization to a great state or a best practice state in terms of mental wellness. EAP programs or EFAP programs, very much commonplace and can play a tremendous role in supporting mental health and well-being. Manager training. If there is one thing that I would recommend to organizations trying to get it right as it relates to mental health and well-being, it's manager training. So one of the most unfortunate situations that you can see is an individual who's struggling, having the courage to step up and seek help from a manager, and a manager being in a position where they're just not equipped to respond and provide any kind of assistance to that employee. I think it puts both individuals in a really difficult situation, and it's really unfortunate because there are often excellent manager training programs and excellent resources that they could recommend to employees as long as that's top of mind. So just for the sake of time, I'm going to move on and just jump into the next pillar, which is social wellness. So, and again, I think this goes without saying, most organizations are getting it right as it relates to social wellness. And actually, when I say getting it right, putting some focus on the area of social wellness and driving, a great culture within their organization. A couple of things that I would encourage from a best practice perspective. I think first and foremost, it's about creating a culture of kindness. Okay, and I think, it probably sounds a little fluffy to say, creating a culture of kindness. But again, I think it's foundational, right? The bottom line is if employees don't feel, supported, respected, embraced within their organization, they will not be highly engaged and they will not be highly productive. You want to feel like you're in an organization where you're respected and where you can speak up if you're struggling and share with one another. And I think that's really just, sort of the do unto others as you would have done unto you principle that we teach our kids. I think it could be foundational within the community of an organization. Getting personal, sharing and listening, especially if you're in a management type relationship, again, sort of setting the tone and encouraging that amongst others can be really key. And then as it relates to sort of a last principle, it is the little things. It's having regular team meetings, finding opportunities for groups of people to come together. I see excellent cadences of, regular one-on-ones, team meetings, and then company town halls in a lot of organizations that we work with. Social events, opportunities to get off-site, things like celebrating the wins, celebrating people's birthdays, and then the last point I would touch on is recognition programs. So finding ways to really identify and call out the great things that employees are doing to create an awesome culture can go a very long way. From a financial wellness perspective, as it relates to that financial pillar, I'd say the most important thing is to provide education and awareness to employees. So ensuring that individuals know what an important part of health management this is and why they should pay attention to it, and then giving access to education, advice, and tools to really understand how to plan well for the future. And then lastly, physical wellness. I'll talk about 3 really key cultural aspects, and I would say these are very much best practice and can be, sort of prevalent throughout an organization, but again, I would say that management needs to set the tone on this. Things like walking meetings. How often do we sit during the day, whether it's sitting at your desk, sitting in meetings, etc. There's many opportunities. I wouldn't say most necessarily. Sometimes you do need to look at a screen or some information, but many meetings could be taking place on a walk and in an active way. Okay, healthy snacks and meals. I talked about this earlier, just really setting the tone with doing the right things from a culture perspective on a regular basis. And then something that we've seen quite a bit more of, especially recently, standing workstations. And then from the list of programs, you can certainly see that it's a robust list there. If I could pull out one thing in particular, I would say risk assessment is the most important thing that organizations can offer. So whether that's biometric screening clinics, where a nurse is coming on site and actually testing for things like blood pressure, blood cholesterol, blood glucose level, or online health risk assessments, which are typically, significantly lower cost, but can also have a great impact in encouraging individuals to just really become more aware of their current health habits and their health risks. I've long been a huge advocate of biometric clinics as, the one thing, overall, if an employer is going to invest in just one thing from a program perspective, I would strongly encourage the biometric clinics. I could tell, many stories, many examples of individuals being sort of encouraged to come to a program because it's in their workplace, it's convenient, it's easy. Sometimes a little bit of peer pressure comes into play, or a little bit of competitive spirit, because you have individuals who have gone for their test and they're encouraging, the individual at the desk beside them or a coworker to go and have their testing done too. And often, 60 to 70% of the time, when you find an individual who has a health risk, they were not previously aware of that risk and wouldn't have known had they not come through those clinics. So, I can get on a bit of a soapbox on this topic. In particular, I think it's really important for individuals to know what their risk profile is so that they can really focus on making the changes that they need to make. And often that results in engaging in all these great programs that are being offered in workplaces. So it's an excellent way to start a program. It's an excellent way to start a new year to give that information to individuals and to get them engaged in a more mindful approach to overall holistic health and well-being. So in the next few minutes, I just want to share some case studies. So we've decided to put the focus for the case studies on some smaller organizations. So back to that point of less than 50% of organizations who have less than 50 employees are offering comprehensive programs. I hope it comes to light through some of the information that I just shared that some of these more cultural or best practice initiatives don't have to be high cost. They can be very manageable within organizations that have small employee populations, but also potentially with smaller budgets. What we also wanted to share is, some examples of these smaller organizations who, from our perspective, are getting it right in building great programs. So we have the good fortune to work with a number of these organizations. So let me tell you a little bit about them and what they're doing. So the first is Finance It. So Finance It is an organization that was founded in 2011, located in downtown Toronto. They're approximately 120 employees, although I know they're growing quickly. And they're a software company that's focused on payment solutions for smaller businesses. They are providing, at this point, monthly massages for their employees. They do annual biometric screenings. So they've certainly sort of bought into the importance of biometric screening clinics, and they're doing them on a regular basis, I'm really happy to say. They are also offering flu clinics to their employees. They do regular on-site yoga. So, you can see from the slide and the way that we've captured how some of these programs cross pillars. Something like yoga, for example, really touches on social, physical, and mental health and well-being. So it can be a great way to, encourage, again, that holistic health perspective for employees. Given the nature of their business, they're doing a fantastic job as it relates to financial health as well, with education programs, and one area in particular they focused on recently is RSP. So the second case study that we wanted to share is an organization called Uberflip. So Uberflip is 80 to 85 employees. They were founded in 2012, and they're located in Liberty Village. Uberflip is really a content experience platform for businesses, doing all kinds of great things in terms of sales and marketing tools. Uberflip is a little earlier on their health and wellness journey. They're certainly doing some really tremendous things as it relates to social health, programs to encourage employees, or I should say initiatives to encourage employees to gather, have created a great sense of community, but also are doing things like massage days, regular fitness classes, have done things like kickboxing and Krav Maga. I won't claim to know what that is, but it looks very interesting.
Israeli self-defense.
Okay, there you go. And as well are doing a number of on-site and virtual seminars. So, and you can see many of those on-site and virtual seminars are focused on areas of mental health and well-being. So mindfulness, meditation, emotional intelligence, empathy and cultivating, which I love, seeing up there on that slide. It goes back to the point of, just really creating a culture of kindness and reinforcing that on a regular basis through education with employees. And we couldn't go through case studies without taking a moment to talk about, some of the great things that are happening here at League. Certainly we feel that this is a really, really important part of our culture, both just as an organization, but given the business that we're in, we absolutely are very committed to setting the tone and having a best practice health and wellness program, but also really best practice health and wellness culture in our organization. So thus far, in 2017, we've held over 80 health and wellness events, sessions, and seminars. And what you will see in the next two slides is that they certainly cross all four of the pillars that we talked about. So from a physical health perspective, we have a run club. We do ergonomic assessments. We have sit-stand workstations. We actually do have a ping pong table, so very startup culture friendly. We also have taken it to a next level as it relates to ping pong. We have an expert in ping pong who comes in regularly to make sure that we are all, given that we are all quite competitive, make sure that we are all best practice ping pong players. We have also done off-site things like spin classes, as you see from the picture here. So, a great way just to promote also the sense of community and social health as well. From a mental health perspective, we definitely are very focused, as I mentioned earlier, on things like morning meditation and encouraging that type of, quick break, whether it's 2 minutes or 5 minutes throughout the day at the beginning of a meeting to do a little bit of mindfulness or meditation. And then something else I wanted to mention, we recently had Michael Landsberg come in and speak to our group, really, really compelling and passionate advocate in the area of mental health. And, I think it goes without saying that he did a tremendous job in really inspiring our organization to make sure that we're keeping the conversation going and keeping a culture of awareness as it relates to mental health. From a social perspective, interesting to see Johnny Walker whiskey tasting up there on our list. Not every organization would put that on their sort of best practice health and wellness program list. but I think it fits our culture. And, point being, we have a lot of individuals who have given us great feedback about the kinds of programs they would like to see as team building or social activities, and we're paying attention. So you'll see a very broad range down the left side of social activities that we've either brought into the organization or, again, we'll plan to bring in the future. Something else that was done recently was terrarium building. So this has been an educational process for me too. So this was a fascinating activity. We've done some work as well with Facebook, who are neighbors of ours, who have also done some terrarium building and couldn't accommodate all of the employees that wanted to participate. So, certainly the type of thing that's getting some really great traction. So I know we want to save some time for questions, so I will just wrap up with a couple of additional points that I'd love to leave you with. I think the slide certainly speaks somewhat for itself, but I did want to just take a moment to come back to our anchor point, which is really, at the end of the day, people are absolutely the most valuable part of any organization. And, it is very, very intuitive to invest in those individuals. And one of the most important areas that you can invest in is the health of that employee population. And so really the bottom line is, are you going to do nothing or are you going to do something? And, great programs don't have to be sort of all the bells and whistles. They can start with, small steps. It's a journey and it's an evolution, and, start somewhere, start putting programs in place and paying attention to health, and evolve over time. So a few takeaways, and then I think Brian's going to open it up for a few questions. I talked about leadership being an incredibly critical component in a successful program. Something else I would also really encourage in the smallest or largest of organizations is having wellness champions. Some of the greatest programs happen organically with one individual who's just a tremendously passionate advocate for health and well-being, and will, get very resourceful and make sure that employees know what's happening at any given point in time. They're managing a budget and bringing new and exciting programs into the workplace on a regular basis. So whether it's one champion or a whole network of champions can go a really long way in terms of creating an effective program. I talked about communication plans. Use all of the avenues and vehicles that you have to communicate with your employees about what's taking place and just reinforce a message of health. Create open lines of communication, back to the point of it starts with kindness and open dialogue. Give employees a voice, let them tell you what they'd love to see in the program. And ultimately, look for ways to make the program strategic in nature. So how are you going to capture information that reinforces the value of the investment in employee health? And again, that can be through things like engagement surveys. It can be through, a very broad and robust data analytics dashboard. But the bottom line is start with something, create some great metrics that are reinforcing what it is that you're doing. Make sure you're attaching what it is that you're capturing to the programs that you're putting in place, and go back and reevaluate on a regular basis. So I think we're going to open it up at this point and take a couple of questions.
Yep, that's right, Lori. That was really, really good. I don't know if everyone on the line got how zen it was to do the terrarium building, but highly, highly recommend that. So yeah, we're going to open it up to a couple questions right now. Thank you so much for giving us some of your time and hopefully learning quite a bit. I had mentioned sort of off the top that if you do have questions, to add them into the chat. So I'm just going to take a look in here right now, and we'll start addressing some of these as they make sense. So, question for Lori. Lori, first question from John. Is there a technology that is available to support these types of programs, including rewards as people meet goals or milestones?
Yeah, absolutely. There are all kinds of platforms that are available that can, provide rewards and incentives and be as sophisticated as tracking, wearable device information, to allocate incentives or rewards towards. or, as, let's say, rudimentary as doing things like, health challenges and tracking, just synopsis of minutes of physical activity done per day in team settings, and then the employer can allocate rewards accordingly based on sort of top teams and whatnot. But, John, to your question, yes, there are a number of different platforms available. Certainly League has some great tools, and if you're interested, we'd be happy for you to reach out and we can share some more specifics.
Next question from Sarah. How do you see biometric screening leading to better health if there are no tools offered to them act on this information offered by the employer?
I think that's a fantastic question, Sarah. I mean, I think, biometric screening clinics in isolation won't necessarily result in the best outcomes. So doing screening clinics and having targeted intervention options, coaching, a whole host of programs that can follow for individuals who have risk factors would be, what I would promote as best practice. But really the point that I was making, through this session as well is if an organization only has a limited budget and they can only do one thing, starting with biometric clinics where, for example, let's say an employee comes in and is told by the registered nurse that they do have high cholesterol, and there isn't necessarily a program to help that employee manage their cholesterol, the nurse can be educated around what are the next steps and follow-up items that that individual can take based on their risk profile, providing resources that can be available virtually at little to no cost, recommending following up with a family physician or community resources. So again, at a sort of a low budget, that type of program without a whole host of additional targeted chronic intervention means or disease management programs can certainly still have an impact.
All right. We're just going to, John, you got a question already. We're just going to skip to Martine quickly, and then if we can, we'll come back to yours. All team pictures look like a very young employee population with so many employees staying in the workforce longer. How are they being included and engaged?
Yeah, another great question, and I think it comes back to the point that I was talking about around, no program really being one size fits all, and needing to provide a host of options to target a really broad and sort of multi-generational workforce, which is the case in many organizations. So I guess to the first part of your point, we do have a very young workforce here at League. Believe me, I feel it every day. But again, I think with employees staying in the workforce longer, we are seeing more of these, various types of chronic conditions. And, doing things like clinics, risk profiles, providing information that speaks to, let's say, an individual who does have a chronic back condition, for example, around what they can be doing to manage that particular condition can go a long way and can speak to a really broad workforce. So there is a lot that can be done across all of these pillars. If an organization and if the program planners or the program leads are thinking about that broad set of needs and that broad set of demographics and planning accordingly.
All right, we're going to jump down to a question from Leanne. What if organizational health risks identified through HRA, biometrics, STD data, et cetera, don't align with what employees are asking for in terms of well-being programming? Do you find it better to focus on employees who are asking for, do you find it better to focus on what employees are asking for or on the lagging data, what the lagging data is showing?
Hi, Leanne. No surprise. Great question. So I think the bottom line here, and I know we're running short on time, so I guess my short answer would be it needs to be a combination of both. Okay, so I think programs that focus on the key health risks that are identified, through these great initiatives and, essentially are also targeted at the key risk factors coming out on aggregate through those programs, need to be part of a very comprehensive strategy, particularly if it's, a very outcomes-based strategy. But in addition to that, in order to drive, high participation, high interest, and speak to the needs of a broad population, you also need to listen to employees and, you know, bring a good balance of what they'd love to see being offered.
Do you want to get a couple more questions? Okay, yeah, let's keep going. All right, let's address this one from James. Hi, Lori.
Hi, James.
In the healthcare ecosystem, the key driver of healthcare is integration with the universal medical system, e.g. family doctors. How does League connect the employer offering results with this system?
So typically with some of the programs that I talked about, like biometric clinics and whatnot, you know, a registered nurse or nurse practitioner is coming on site, and it is more of a referral into the public system. So, you know, referring that individual to their primary care physician for follow-up. In addition, we are building out a virtual care facility within, you know, our League offering. I won't spend too much time on that, but I think it's a really exciting part of our vision for the future in terms of supporting individual employees in getting access to a broader array of resources through our health marketplace, including primary care and specialty care alongside allied health practitioners.
All right, everyone, we want to be very respectful of your time. Thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. I think I can speak for hopefully all of you. Lori, you did a great job. That was fantastic and very, very educational, I know for me anyway, and I'm sure for everyone on the line. So thank you very, very much. If you do have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us. You can find out more about League at league.com. You can reach out to Lori at league.com. And let us know if you have any further questions. And all of this information, the webinar will be available via video and via SlideShare. We will be sending that to you through email. And once again, thank you very, very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.